Well, folks, I'm real excited for this one. Something a little different with my new friend, Random Randy from the Red Thread podcast. This dude's always getting into all kinds of different stuff, man. I'm mostly, obviously into the secret societies, the geopolitics, more current event type things. And Random Randy seems to really fit you, the name Random, right? I mean, you're all over the place. We talked about this yesterday, and it's great, man. So you brought this thing to my attention, this All Tomorrow's book from the author and the artist, C.M. Koseman, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And this is a very, very weird little deal here. Like you said, it's kind of Lovecraftian. It's its own little category of whatever you want to call this. And I think that it's fascinating. So I'm really thankful that you brought this to my attention, dude. Why don't you kind of give your plugs up front here? Because people's
Oh,
attention
for sure.
spans.
Yeah. Yeah. You can find me random fracts, like the word fractal. So just use that thought. Random fracts on Instagram. The Red Thread podcast is on Podbean, Spotify, Podcast Addict so far. So yeah, you can find me there. Feel free, anybody, if you're wanting to inquire about anything we speak about or anything else, just drop me a DM on Instagram. I'm open to that. So yeah,
Yeah,
there you
man. And this is a
go.
very visual episode. That's why we're putting this on YouTube. So this will be out on YouTube the same day that we record it, and then the audio on my end will come out after Randy feels like he wants to put it up. If you feel like it, man, it's all up to you.
Yeah,
But
yeah, we can put it up as soon as it comes out. I'm game with
cool.
that. It's interesting. We may have to do, like a part two to follow up on some of these species, or as I kind of think of them, aspects of man, that are in this book. It's a very, very visual kind of introduction, though. We definitely need to have the visual,
The
the
way
first time around, point people in the direction to take a look at it too, because it's super interesting.
Yeah, dude, the way that I see these things is like caricatures of personalities. I think that you laid it out a different way, but it's fascinating. And so I'm excited to show the audience here like these different creatures and the way that I want you to kind of do the bulk of the explaining here because you found this. But first of all, dude, before we get into this book, like what made you take the route that you're taking in your research, where like you said, you're kind of all over the place, but it's in a great way. I mean, like usually people
Um,
find niches, and you seem to be at one moment you're
Yeah, I'm kind of anti-niche,
yeah, that's the
almost.
thing. I mean, that's
Um,
great.
and it's like, I got really pretty stuck in Tartaria for a good number of months there. And after researching all of that stuff, uh, I was really hard pressed to find something, whether it be like a political aspect of life or social aspect of life or psychological things that don't tie in to Tartaria itself. And as that all kind of ties together, you wind up going down roads like you do, Ryan, with the secret societies and a little bit more of the black book type of situation of our country and our world. And so that's interesting too. And after starting my podcast and reaching out to people and finding out um, how like secular, I guess, or specific in research a lot of people are, I just didn't necessarily feel that was for me. I like to just keep my channels open, if you will, and kind of allow whatever to present itself, because it seems like no matter where I point my attention, there's something very relevant there that people could benefit from the knowledge of. And like with this particular book, I kind of stumbled upon it. You know how we do as conspiracy theorists, or esoteric buffs, we like to kind of go down these rabbit holes. And as I was looking at something else one day, this popped up in audiobook format, but it also had the snips of the photos, of the images in there. So I was able to kind of really see that there was something here that kind of speaks to people's humanity. And it's weird because it's called All Tomorrows, but the author CM Koseman was on a podcast, Alt Shift X podcast, and he was talking about how he was wanting to call it All Yesterdays. And I guess his co-writer or the other illustrator was like, no, let's go with All Tomorrows. So that kind of gives it a little bit more mystery, kind of like the Star Wars situation, in a galaxy, in the future, far, far away. It kind of distances it from people's here and now, which I think, we need sometimes, which is why like a lot of fictions are beneficial to the human condition, because we're able to stand back from these stories a little bit and not feel so offended by whatever's going on in these
Yeah.
stories. That's the biggest barrier, I think. It's like people get super offended when something hits too close to home, so we kind of have to, as people, spin these things into lore or fictions, in order to teach these lessons. I mean, I know the Christians probably hate when you talk about the Bible as if it was lore, but essentially it's a guidebook, just like any other good fiction. Not saying that these things in the Bible maybe didn't happen, but they are penned down by a person.
Yeah.
You have to admit at a certain point, somebody wrote this stuff. So you have to allow, the understanding that humans, people, we are inherently flawed. It's honestly probably the most beautiful thing about us is we all have our individual strengths. And while some other people, kind of going back to why so random, there's a lot of people out there that run with their specific direction. And I feel like that there have to be some people out there to kind of acquire these branches of knowledge and kind of bring that fruit down.
Yeah.
And make my own dissemination and my own interpretation and present that to others. Whether it's people that just know me in person, or a different group of people that maybe would listen to my podcast than anyone else's. I think that that's very true. People tend to gravitate towards their specific tastes, and you try to get them to budge in any way, shape, or form, and that's a difficult thing to do. But if you can kind of source different pieces of information and tie them together in a fun and interesting way, and not necessarily have like an agenda, because I couldn't tell you what the end game is, Ryan. You know what I mean?
For
For like
sure.
all of this stuff. And I feel like there are a lot of writers and creators out there that have like set agenda. And I kind of just dove into this thing, open-hearted and open-minded, without a set agenda. For a hot minute there, it was like I was stuck on Tartaria. But the more I started to realize how this ties in with fiction and fantasy and a lot of the untold stories, the more I started to look in other directions, because you can find whatever information you want in the archives at Library of Congress.
Yep.
You can find this side of the argument or this side of the argument. You
That's
know
why
what I
it's
mean?
such a beautiful system. I mean, it's set up perfectly. We have a lot of flaws in the way that our governments ran. But I mean, you mentioned South Park earlier before we were even recording. But
Yeah.
there's that episode where Cartman travels back to the Revolutionary times, 1776,
Yeah.
and they're sitting there talking like, yeah, like let's make a system where half the society can be a bunch of like pussies, and then half the society can be a bunch of like over the top, what we would call today toxic masculine men,
Yeah.
and they can really balance each other out in a healthy way. I don't think that they had any intention of it being healthy. I told you that quote that George Washington had where he said like something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing big time here, but he was saying that he didn't have any intention on Freemasonry and secret societies really infiltrating the United States, but no one is happier about that than he is. And this is in George Washington's words, again, paraphrased, but
Right.
and that's what makes these kinds of conversations interesting about this author's really interesting idea on what obviously it's a work of fiction, but it sure does seem like if you were to call it all yesterdays like you wanted, I don't think it's not just as catchy, but I think that it has something to do with, yeah, there may be something to this idea that rather than man evolving from animals evolve from man, right? I mean, and that makes a lot more sense if you're viewing things from a biblical worldview, which I don't know exactly if I'm all in on that idea, but the hardcore Christians and people that are very religious tend to think that the world was built for man, right?
Right.
More new age people think that we all need to live together, and I don't know, I'm somewhere in the middle there. I don't think that we should just go around as humans just totally fucking everything up. But at a certain point, it's like, yes, a human's life does mean more than a cow's or than a deer or any other kind of animal that we may eat. So
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about this book too, is it kind of breaks down the proposition of what if in the distant past. Keep in mind, this book is written from a point of view of an entity a billion years in the future, after the end of all man life, all humankind life, right? So this is coming from that point of view. So which is part of the reason why you look at it, if you think of it as all yesterdays, it makes a little more sense, because from the point of the view of the narrator, you're a billion years in the future after everything's said and gone. So when you, and as the people will see these different images of some of these, we can call them species or types of man. I think another version of a title could have been The Many Faces of Man. So that again speaks to the personalities of people. And the crazy thing is that really caught my eye right out of the gate is this starts off with man on Mars. Now, whether man had to move to Mars, after destroying Earth, or what the situation was there, it doesn't break down all that part of the lore in this story. But it does start off with humanity being based, or at least partially, expanding to Mars. And the interesting thing about, after the Mars situation more or less stops, like man goes out and starts to populate, the universe. And this is all during a time of like an energetic alignment. And it's super interesting because, how like Ari Aslin talks about, the old Saturnian sky, and the different alignments happening in the heavens that allowed for free flow of energy and information, is basically the gist of what that alignment does, which is why, astronomical alignments have certain effects on people's personalities, or on their, good or bad fortune sometimes, because there is an energetic alignment. It ties into the plasma universe or electric universe theory, or you can actually probably call it more of an understanding now, because there's a lot more concrete evidence to support this energetic type of a situation going on here. I think more people would be open to seeing things that way. If it wasn't so like kind of shadow banned, you have a lot of reactors and things around the world that are just self-organizing plasma. They call them oftentimes nuclear, and so there's a lot of stuff hidden right behind, locked doors that leads me to, that the rumors of lead me to look at a story like this that starts off in Mars with a later kind of insight on that energetic alignment later in the book, which is really interesting. And this all came out in 2006. So we're talking, what, 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good period of time, to be out there. And it's interesting that within that period of time also, you have folks like Ari Aslin coming out and talking about this ancient alignment of the heavens, basically, that would have linked, Earth and Mars, at least, is supposed to be like almost a shoe in, like this was the way it was in the past. Whether you believe in space or not is regardless. The pictures that they're showing of Mars having these structures that there are equals to on Earth is suggestive of, a population living in both places of a similar origin. You know what I mean? And it's just crazy. So that's just how it starts with the Martian Americans.
Well, real quick, Randy, there's something really interesting that you were talking about when we were kind of going over what we wanted to do here. It does seem, in a way, especially for like this new, Elon Musk, like all the stuff that he's up to. And, I was about to say NASA, but it seems more SpaceX, more of these new people, right? The new guys getting in the game. You have a lot of focus on Mars, almost like you said. It's like, are we on Mars right now? Who's to say that, just
Right.
because we call this Earth, it doesn't mean that we're actually the third rock away from the sun. We could be
we could very well be on Mars, and how are we gonna fucking know? Honestly,
we
all they
will.
have to do is name names, stamp titles on things, and these people in charge are very good at stamping titles on everything in order to dominate and control it, right? There's kind of another theory about Earth actually being spelled heart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's an anagram.
Right. So we may very well just be living it on, in the heart of this realm, and that's why it was called heart, and they mixed it up, and now it's Earth. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways you could go with the names of things. But
There's
like,
something real. I mean, dude, this idea here that, you know, the earth from a biblical perspective again was built for man, right? The symbol for Mars is the man symbol, right? Just like Venus is the female symbol. Now
right.
I'm not one of these like hardcore misogynists. I make a lot of jokes, but in reality, I think that yeah, men and women are equal. Obviously, men are better at some things, women are better at other things. But it sure does seem, especially in the older days, that Earth, this planet that we live on, this plane, this realm, whatever you want to call it, it's more fitting for men, right? If technology's gone, yeah, men are and all law is gone. Men are gonna probably do better than women are, right? And it's
Well,
just
it's yeah, it's really hard to say. And now that you mention, men being from Mars, women supposedly from Venus,
yeah,
and where's Earth supposedly right in the middle, right?
yeah,
What do we have here?
exactly.
Fucking both of us.
Hmm. Yeah,
So it may very well be that at some point in the past this was the case. Or the way I like to look at planets is simultaneous dimensions stacked on top of each other. Okay, this is why they're finding duplicates for certain landmarks on Mars as they look through the Mars portal, which is that light in the sky, right? They're
yeah.
seeing the light from Mars. I believe that's true. I don't necessarily believe that they could fly up into the sky and get there without some form of harmonic matching, in order to access that gate. There's something to that, and there's something to this firmament situation as well. I mean, just about everybody in this community has seen the videos of the rockets skimming along what looks like making waves in the sky as they kind of slide along the sky up there. So there's really strange stuff, there. Personally, I think that it's just an octave higher of existence. So we don't permeate that layer. We don't vibrate the same frequency. So it's just like, one hand clapping on another. This is all energy. Nothing's ever actually touching. So you would have the same situation, based on density and frequency, whether you go up or you go down.
Mm.
At a certain point, it gets so dense and hot that I'm sure that there's a different octave of existence, quote unquote, below us as well. So, yeah,
Well, when you
it's
say
really
above and
crazy.
below, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily higher or lower than us. They could be here and we just don't have the
That's it.
ability to see
Yeah,
them, right?
we don't have the verbiage to explain something like that
Exactly.
either. So that is crazy in itself. Same thing with past and present, or past and future. Those are the only two words that we have to describe this idea, which really kind of deserves a little bit more, a little bit more focus and a little bit more verbiage to like disseminate what past means. Um, because again and again, you have these ideas like in Star Wars where this takes place long ago, but sometimes it'll be like far away, but in the future. But like to us, that's long ago. The light takes so long to travel here, so we're
Sure.
effectively looking at the past. So you could go around in circles about that, and so it's super nuts. And then like so getting back to this book, when you start to look through it, it starts off with this civil war, and that's super interesting because there's a lot of people that speak about this Martian war that happened. A lot of people think that the Vedic texts describing the Vimanas and all this other stuff are explaining this like war of Mars and Earth, basically the war of men. These gods were men like usually that were battling in the sky. They had faces like ours, and you know what I mean, and wore jewelry like we do, and a lot of very similar things to what we know as humans do. So,
Yeah, dude. I think it's interesting too that these people, I heard something when we were really kind of just looking into this barely, that the first people to set foot on Mars weren't astronauts. They were children barefooted walking on artificial grass. You know what I mean? It's just an
yeah,
interesting idea. And I think that with the fascination of space, I mean, Matt and I were talking about this from the Great Deception. Recently you've really seen a wave of NASA fans. I mean, space is just something that people are obsessed with. And obviously that's always been the case, but it's getting really mainstream. You're seeing NASA merch over at Walmart. You know what I mean? And it's
yeah,
just like you have people that are bitching and complaining about Nazis, and then they're wearing a NASA shirt, these social justice warrior types. So it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, exactly.
So, dude,
100%.
these
But
star
yeah,
people.
yeah, they so the star people would have been, let's consider them the main first ancestor, right, of these races that were put on Mars and put on Earth. So these would have left what the Earth long ago, became star people, became adept at living in the void, basically. So
Stanley Kubrick makes a reference to this too in Space Odyssey 2001, right?
right, and so the crazy thing about Space Odyssey 2021 is he's leaning more towards the technological arc. That's kind of what the monolith signifies, is like an AI technological arc, which yes, these star people put into play and send the genetic material and all that stuff, and it takes but based on what this book says, like epochs for these ships to get there. you know um Even though the NASA wants to tell us that it only takes 6 months at less than fucking half the speed of light or whatever, to get to Mars. But apparently, there's a longer way around when you're transferring like genetic material and that sort of thing. So they sent a lot of biologics there and turned Mars into a green lush planet. And then that took extended periods of time. A lot of these species and a lot of these beings, like these star people and some of these machine entities that we'll talk about a little later, they kind of have a timeless feel to them.
Yeah.
Like they don't understand a year like we understand a year. If you're out there, drifting in the void and constantly thinking, constantly creating, right, coming up with concepts, what to implement, and you're in the void. So in the void, you have, whether you want to believe in gravity or not, you have a kind of a suspended state, with the only thing acting on anything else is like the torsion field of itself and other things. This is how things interact in space, whether you want to call it gravity or not. There's these torsion fields, these values to certain bodies in space. So these would have that same thing. They would be able to manipulate things, kind of like we're told they can manipulate things in zero G that they simply cannot manipulate here on Earth.
Well, what
So
about the scare of global warming and all these things? There's a focus on trying to expand because they tell us we only have one planet, right? Now, if we were to actually be able to wide scale move to Mars or move to whatever other planet they're telling us that we're moving to, who's to say that they're actually taking these people to Mars? What if they're just taking them to like a biodome or like a
yeah,
biosphere?
I'm really under the impression that that's like you see on um Resident Evil, the Hive underground. you know
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there are situations like that, whether you want to go under the ocean, like off of an oil carrier or oil rig, and you go underwater. And I don't know if you ever saw Sequest, that movie or that show way back in the day. It would have been in the 90s. Sequest. And so they had these in this show, they had these giant submarines that were basically cities upon themselves under the water. And with the LED technology we have, you could easily project windows underwater and pretty much make people believe they're on a fucking dead desert planet. I mean, if you really wanted to, and then just give them the piece of information like, oh, you have gravity because we have a gravity fucking maker. You know what I mean? Like, they're already implementing this in science fiction with this, they spin, they have centrifugal gravity, so on, right? So they're just putting these impressions. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I 100% believe there's something to that and something to the scaring people off of this planet.
Well,
You
and
know
you're
what I mean?
talking about desert planets, dude. I mean, this is Matt and I just together did we went through half of a 113 slide presentation from NASA. We're going to do the other half here soon. But there is blatantly, they say that the desertification, I pronounced it desertification because I was just reading fast, but the desertification, they're going to take, these lush forests and turn them into deserts. Now you had a theory that this could have been what California was, Southern California with these and Texas, where these massive oil fields are
Yeah, and
now.
especially the Middle East. Yeah, 100%. Especially after moving out here to the Midwest and seeing the biomass get laid down year after year. When they cut the crops down, they harvest the corn, they chop and then just till all of that cellulose, all of that plant material, they till it back into the ground. So they're just stacking year after year after year. So in these lush places where you're growing crops over and over again, this is what you do to maintain the soil, especially prior to nitrate-based fertilizers. You would have to till the soil. You would have to keep it rich with biomass in order for it to be productive. So
Almost like
when you have,
mulch for
yeah,
gardeners.
exactly, and that's exactly where in my opinion oil comes from. Is I don't know that it takes as long to be created on the planet as we're told. Then again, when you step back from our realm into a timeless kind of point of view, it doesn't fucking matter how long it takes. And if there's an in between civilizations that we just don't know about, and we kind of run everything back to back in our heads, like who's to say that flood cataclysm didn't leave a couple million year gap, you know what I mean, where we weren't around and this shit was fossilizing or whatever. But I'm more apt to think of it as an electrical event that causes chemical reactions and changes within everything in this realm. So that's why a lot of people say you have these mounds or mountains that look like animals, and when they break them open, the stone on the inside looks like the organs of the animals. And there's a lot of different shout outs to that sort of thinking when you look at it that way. And if you look at oil as just a chemically induced product or a electrically induced product, like you have live basically a cellulose matter, and this is how they make alcohol fuels and canola oils and all this stuff out of plants now. Like it's not a far cry to think that some form of electrical event couldn't expedite or even produce these oil products. And these families in charge of this oil situation are the same ones that are using that oil to create these biomass fields, so that when the next cataclysm comes and covers everything in dirt, and say the sun flips or whatever it does, the moon turns on and the sun turns off, if that's what happens,
And the pole's flipping.
None of us know, right? None of us know. And it may not be just like a magnetic pole flip, but an electrical pole flip. So instead of, the moon absorbing and the sun putting out, maybe it flips around. We don't know. We don't have the information. We've got stories that talk about the moon being a different thing in the past, and the sun also being a different thing, maybe possibly being Saturn, as well as possibly being Jupiter, like way out in the past. And so, like, if all of those different things, the sun being Jupiter or Saturn, could be a possibility, it really kind of lends, I don't know, some credence to a book like this, where you're going into the more biological creature, kind of side of things. And it's honestly, it's kind of a surreal feeling you get from looking at these paintings. A lot of them, I guess, are paintings. So that's
they're beautiful.
cool.
I mean, there's something really interesting about them. Just, I mean, we're gonna get into, I don't know
The
how many there
inspiration
are
behind it is amazing. You
Yeah,
know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
just
Like
these little,
that's
like this thing. I mean, it you can
yeah, that's
definitely just
possibly
chalk it
life on
up.
another planet, possibly. And supposedly these things are copper based. So they have, like Ron from New England, they're copper based.
Yeah, there's an
so
RH
so
negative.
so they've got three legs, like Ron from New England. He's probably got
He's
three
got a third
legs.
leg. He'll tell you that.
Yeah. So these things are a little bit different. You know what I mean? They are.
This one right here kind of looks like Ron. This little one with the neck,
Oh,
not the big one.
he's gonna no.
That's me. I'm
Well,
this
but see, the
big one.
crazy thing is this big one is a mammal, kind of reminiscent of a penguin, is
Yeah.
basically how they explain it, but with claws.
Well,
you
yeah,
know
these rake claws would be like digging for food, right? I mean, it's just you can laugh it off, you can think it's goofy, but there is something to be said about these
and
different
see, this
creatures.
reminds me of a tauntaun, kind of. It's the snow beast, and like on that snow planet in Star Wars, you had the tauntaun. That was like the only creature you saw out on the snow. So just saying it just gave me that feeling. But
Yeah,
here's where it caught me right
this is
here
interesting.
is this. We all know what Q represents nowadays, right? But in 2006, when this guy wrote this book, the we can call them the distortionists of the galaxy, right? That stir up trouble and undo, God's holy creations, if you will, are called the Q. And the picture, do we have the picture of what these things look like? Reminiscent of a dragonfly.
You said this is God's unholy creation is Q?
Yeah, pretty much, because this is the one that comes around and distorts everything that's implemented divinely, right? But the weird thing about this concept is you have to have something like this in order for duality to be a thing in the universe, right? So you would almost always have to have an arch villain to a superhero, right? Like there's always kind of that balance, and like in Batman, when Batman comes out and starts fucking cleaning up the world or whatever, then boom, here comes Joker to fuck things up, right? So this is kind of echoed throughout time in our realm currently as well. There's always a heel, or someone, dude, that,
I mean, you look at this too, this whole thing, this, for some reason, I may be just like putting my own thoughts onto this, but it reminds me of like a Baphomet type figure. And over here, to like, if you're looking at the screen to the left, this thing that looks like an old fashioned bomb, like a ball with a little fuse coming out of it. That's like a male figure. And then the one over here to the right is a female figure. It looks like, to me. I mean, it kind of
really does. It really does. It's like a grotesque spin on these concepts. And you got to look at things like, all right, from the writer's point of view, the inspirations would be of this world, would be things that he knows about, on this planet, right? And you do notice how it's like an inverted man. Like the man is also has 5 spokes, if you will, head, 2 arms, 2 legs. But this creature up here, very reminiscent of like a satyr or a Baphomet character, which with the bottom half of a goat would also have a tail, in a sense. So this is the distortion, representation of distortion, not necessarily destruction. So that comes later. That comes with the advent of later on. There are certain AI type groups or holier than thou type groups, kind of like we deal with today, that are hell-bent on destruction. And those are also included in the universe or in this lore. But so there's like an inverse picture of what humanity is in these Q. And it's also kind of interesting to me that these things are called the Q. They're the implementation of chaos. There we go. The representation of the chaos engine in the universe, right? That's going to go and undo shit and fuck.
That's what Trump was supposed to be for these people that still follow him, right?
Right. And you got this Q situation.
Exactly, dude. This man underneath here, I'm sure people recognize that it's exactly just a copy of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. So I mean, obviously everyone knows who Da Vinci is. I'm sure that everyone's seen that man.
It's super interesting that it's printed on this painting.
That they chose that.
And it's also upside down.
Well, it's the fall of man, right? This is when Q rises up.
Yeah.
And that's the Q.
So that's the Q. And they are master genetic manipulators. They are the Anunnaki, dare I say?
Possibly.
You know what I mean? There's that kind of vibe to them. And their goal is to because they cannot stand the rise of man. They cannot stand having competition in the universe for the rights of creation, basically.
Dude,
they decide to implement situations with humanity to, in some cases, remove the humanity from them, or to confine them within bodies that do them no service, right? Like the body of a llama, or the body of a worm, any number of situations. Because like in the Garden of Eden in the beginning, there was only man. And so this serpent, this Q, this chaos engine comes in and shakes things up and screws it up a bit. And then
I like that.
And then you have like this fracturing of humanity. And they're still working on this fracturing of humanity today with all these titles and all of these, you're a boy, you're a girl, you're it, he, she, we, they, zimzer, all this other shit, when realistically, just learn to be self.
Yeah, just be yourself, dude.
That's it.
It's
the
way
only thing
easier.
there is. It's the only thing there is self.
I really like this, what they say right here. It's for audio listeners, a mile-high Q pyramid towers over the silent world that once housed 4 billion souls. Such structures are the hallmark of Q, and they can be seen on every habitable world they pass through. So we've seen pyramids on Mars, allegedly. Antarctica, where no one's ever lived, there's pyramids, right? There's probably pyramids on every freaking planet, and it's just kind of an interesting take that this Q built them. And again, if you're listening only on audio,
Q is not. Go take a look on YouTube and or look at this book, All Tomorrows. It's everywhere. You can find it. It's a PDF out there.
This is one of those things where you just got to look at this stuff, man. But yeah, Q is not spelled just Q, but it's QU, right? So I mean, you get a little bit of a variation.
It specifies a certain creature or entity or type of entities. And for people that are of like a spiritual nature, think of the chaos engine that is, whether you'd like to admit it or not, Satan is a chaos engine. He brings light to things in order to stir it up. You know what I mean? If everybody knew all the positive things about the world, how fun would it be to live here, right? We got to find these things out as our life goes on. That's part of the joy of it.
Of course,
is kind of breaking this stuff down. But so so these Q essentially wipe out the planet, right? They wipe out Earth. They try to prevent or stop like man's expansion, any more than they already had been. Apparently this is in a time where man had a number of planets, and the Q came and basically wiped them all out and harvested their genetic material. So in a weird twisted sense of humor, these Q started creating offshoots of people, in order to populate these worlds again in their own image or in their own way, which was just like a twisted, bastardized Island of Dr. Moreau type situation. You know what I mean? It was a weird backwards evolution that, it's weird to say this out loud, especially like on airs. It makes a lot of sense to me that something like this may very well have, and just keep an open mind, people. That's the only suggestion I have for humanity is keep an open mind. You see how crazy and weird shit is getting. So imagine how crazy and weird shit may have been.
Yeah, when you don't have the ability to share the information, these weird, like the internet, it's such a great thing. I mean, that's how you and I are communicating right now, and then this is getting out to people. When these things aren't around, who knows what the hell's going on, man? Because with all this out here, with all this technology, we still don't know even a fraction of what's actually going on.
Yeah, so dude, we still have these labels are, the biggest problem, I think. Granted, we have to have labels in our society, the way it's built, the way it works, professions, labels, so on. But hopefully more people are realizing that, and that's that we are all of one, essentially, denomination. We are all humanity. And the cool thing about this book is it allowed me to take a look at my humanity and the humanity of others, and see different aspects to their personalities or their mannerisms through the lens of these different creatures in this book. Like the first one that pops up right here is the worm people, right? So just imagine, use your little imaginations and fire that up. These worm people would have been the most basic form, a nematode, the most basic form of life, but imagine at some point in the past, these things had consciousness, like mole people, right? We hear a lot about ant people. We hear a lot of underground entities and things, and it even gets even cooler a little later on. I can't wait to get through here, but
dude, yeah, these drawings alone are just insane, man. Like it really does make your mind wonder a little bit.
It does. This inspiration, and I believe all inspiration comes from God or from the spiritual muse in the sky. You know what I mean? Yeah. People become inspired through an avenue that's outside themselves most of the time, especially left-brained or right-brained artists.
And
a
so what
lot of the
these
time
worm
though.
people would do, I mean, like what they would just bury themselves, and like you
They
said,
would
like mole
just dig.
people.
They would just dig, and if they came across food, they would eat it. And if they came across another worm, they would either fuck it or eat it, and that was their existence. They
Yeah.
served that purpose, and that was it. So
Binary existence.
right, and so these Q, they just broke humanity into all these different like fauna, maybe not so much flora, but fauna, the different animals. And because they saw, essentially they saw what God had made, and they're like, no, fuck that, we're gonna have a say. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And so they just pulled the sentient creature from the planet, the highest evolved thing, and said, boom, or knock you back a peg, fucking slug them in the chest with genetic engineering, and knock them back to simpler versions of themselves. The crazy thing though is, like, it talks about in this book that these things still had sentience for an extended period of time after they were genetically modified. So that's pretty scary to think that these things would be like digging underground and be completely aware and completely conscious of their own thoughts for millions of years.
Well, and think about it, if you're a person and you go through some trauma, right? Now obviously there's varying degrees of people probably listening, and people just everywhere that have different degrees of trauma, but you adapt, right? I mean, like, this is how people, if you're in a shitty situation long enough, your brain adapts to it, and that just becomes normal to you. So in the case of these worm people, yeah, they're digging around, they're eating shit, they're either, when they see a fellow worm, they're deciding, do I want to eat this person or fuck this person? It's a disgusting and a sad way to think about it, but it's the reality in this book. So it's just a fascinating
and
thing.
we also kind of, we run into this in a very like metaphoric kind of way in our own lives. I don't speak for everybody, but I definitely speak for myself, where there was a period in my life where those were the only two fucking things on my mind. Either was, do I eat it or do I fuck it? And so these, each of these creatures kind of speaks, and you can allow it to kind of mirror yourself if you're open to it. And that's the cool thing about being able to look at something like this through different eyes, and not just going, that can't be real, or buying 100% into it and going, oh, that's 100% fucking real, that's boom, stamp on it, that's the one I'm running with. But to come from a place in the middle where you can look and go, well, shit, we've all been a worm person from time to time, right? Just digging along and on autopilot, and then it comes down and you got these titans.
That's one of the
super
things,
interesting here.
Yeah, dude. That's one of the things, is that there's out of each one of these characters, we can probably pick one that we relate to the most right now. But it seems like each human that's alive today, that's like well-rounded, well-versed in life, probably has a little bit of each one of these little characteristics in them. Whether it's the worm, whether it's the titan, whether it's the
100%.
colonials.
Yes, 100%. And that's the create. And even in a kind of a very spiritual and energetic embodiment of all of these things, what I mean? People are often used to thinking so materially that you can't respect and understand that, like, you're an ever-flowing, ever-changing person. You know what I mean? Some days we will be as a worm person digging along, do I fuck it or do I eat it, and that's it. And other days we might be in a situation where, like this titan here, which is just basically roaming around the plains, kind of with a booming voice and brute strength to modify the surroundings. And the crazy thing about this titan here is you have this elephantine kind of trunk that comes off of the lower lip, which is similar to an elephant. And what do you know about elephants? An elephant never forgets, right? They're very intelligent creatures. And so to look at an elephant and put it through the lens of, holy shit, what if at one point it was humanoid, kind of like this, and over millions and billions of years it just kind of, the skin like fell down over its eyes, you know what I mean, wrinkled up on it, turned gray and sunproof, right? Like, yes, there are some pink elephants or whatever, but pretty much developed its own way of kind of shielding itself from the elements and eating with its trunk, which is a distended lower lip in this picture. But I think in an elephant, it's more like an entire sinus.
Well, their nose would be
crazy.
melting into their trunk, and it even says here that these are the smartest of these subhumans. So this is the smartest out of all these creatures here, this Titan. So yeah, I mean, you're right. A Titan never forgets, and apparently, obviously they're very similar to the elephants. That's a good observation, actually. This is really interesting too. This predators and prey concept, because obviously it's very real in the real world, but these are humanoids still, right?
Yeah,
And you see
throwback
this
to Island of Dr. Moreau.
exactly.
You've got this situation where Dr. Moreau, or the Q, came and fucking made his own island, was like, okay, look, we need panther people, or jaguar people. But then on the flip side, we need these grazing creatures also, because you have to fit these ecological niches, with these creatures in order for like a coherent system to develop. Right. And if you come to the planet, wipe everything out that was already God-given in here,
Yeah.
and then re-implement all these things with the basis of humanity, which is super crazy. Because it seems like they're trying to do the opposite to us now, kind of refuse us back into one kind of a being, while at the same time like destroying our social structures and everything. I'm not sure what these evil fucks are up to right now. I'll just let that slide. But until then, to focus on things like this and learn more about myself and maybe my fellow man is awesome, because we got people out there. You seen them at the grocery store eating the grapes before they paid for them. You got the fucking grazers, you know what I mean? And then you got the predators, which is the fucking manager come over and yell at you and take you into his office and yell at you and give you a ticket, right? So you have these predator and prey dynamic everywhere you go. We see a lot of it in authority figures will more often than not have a very predator feel to them,
Yeah.
And then you have people like these mantelopes, which is interesting.
Weird deals here, dude.
In its own right. And it talks about these mantelopes still had human minds. Yeah, that's a good one right there. These things still had human minds. This is like a giraffe or something, right?
Yeah.
So they still had human minds, even though they were reverted to this form. And so they wandered around the plains and sang songs of agony, like I'd imagine, or something like that. So they're out there just super depressed, wallowing around all the time, just kind of going through the motions, but because their bodies don't allow them to create anything, it was just a painful experience. So over time, evolution favors functionality, not necessarily spirituality, right? Or not necessarily intellect. It'll favor, a less intellectual mantelope than a more intellectual sad mantelope. So
yeah,
and there's a lot of that in our society. Like, a lot of people are not equipped.
Were these things unable to breed?
No, I guess at some point they did start interbreeding.
Okay.
But what happened was, as they interbred, they slowly but surely kind of lost their sense of self, and then basically became livestock. They became the animals they were meant to replace.
This is crazy right here. A dim-witted, half-minded mantelope grew up faster than a smart one.
Mm-hmm. And graze just as efficiently. So evolution would favor the less consciously aware one, right? And we see a lot of creatures, deer, antelopes. When you see them running in herds, they've abandoned their. It's weird to talk like this, but they've abandoned their humanity.
Yeah.
For a herd mentality, right? And we see a lot of like assimilation of groups of creatures on our planet that are very similar to something like this.
Well, think about the freaking people that are really making a killing in like the podcast world. I'm talking about like not like Joe Rogan, but like your TikTok stars and your Vine star types, right? These people don't have a thought in their head. They're just out there dancing. They're like, I bought a golden toilet. I'm going to show you what it looks like. And then they're getting like millions and millions of views.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, evolution is favoring these people. And and that's not necessarily a bad thing, and that's not like a derogatory thing to YouTubers and whatever everywhere. I mean, shit, this is gonna be on YouTube, so I can't hate too hard.
Well, I can. I will too. But I think like this kind of stuff is more deep, like, the thought-provoking things I think are much more important than like, Tim Dillon has this bit where he's like, it's like a freaking, TikTok stars are like, we're gonna give my grandma COVID-19 today, and it's like that's like the whole skit that they do. It's just like it's like everyday
And
life.
that's it, a
That
30 second spiel. And
yeah,
that's like that vicarious reach for people, right? They're vicariously reaching for something resembling a life.
the
And
Kardashians really did that. Like they
yeah,
really did. It wasn't about like how
Jim Tan
interesting you
Laundry
were.
also.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that have done that over
Jersey
time. I
Shore.
think the Kardashians really kind of did it the best. They took it from one, you know, instead of having talent, instead of being able to do something
Oh,
unique,
100%. Yeah,
you're
that and
just getting
the Real
access to
Housewives
someone's
and all
life.
this. Yeah, exactly. And it's all just because like so many people have been like buttoned off from society or like secluded in their little apartment doing their 9 to 5 in a cubicle, or
Yeah.
nowadays working from home and all that stuff. So a lot of these creatures, these mantelopes, that are just grazers. They just hit the grocery store every day after work, graze their food up, go home, make it, procreate, maybe go to sleep, get ready, and do the same thing again the next day. So effectively, there's a lot of people that are sheeple that are
Yeah.
like these mantelopes, you know what I mean? That have, maybe long ago they did abandon their humanity, and slowly but surely we're kind of re-evolving back. Now, this is super interesting.
While you
Have
talk
you
about
ever,
this, I'm gonna go take a piss real quick.
for sure, for sure. So right now we're looking at this rendition of a it's like a dolphin person, right? It's the aquatic kind of species that these Q created to like inhabit the oceans and everything. The weird thing about this to me is you see some references like if you watch Gaia or um, these type of like fringe videos and stuff, talking about like the telepathic and empathetic nature of dolphins, and how these creatures can heal people and speak with people like mind to mind. There are reports of people communicating with dolphins out in the ocean. There are, believe it or not, like in Flipper, where Flipper saves the little kid from a shark by punching it in the gills with its snout. So there's like that demonstrated intelligence there, right? And it really throws me for a loop to see the swimmers in this book, because this speaks to that concept that these dolphins, these porpoises, these other very social mammals of the ocean, um, seem to have some form of humanity to them even to this day. So yeah, even to this, in this time of day, in this day and time, you still have a reference to dolphins as the second, the other smart being on the planet. Like, you know what I mean? Like whales and mammals, giant, large mammals, supposedly are some of the smartest and most empathetic creatures. So, they still have this kind of a level of humanity to them, even as we know them now. Like, you know, um, I mean, shit, they play with us in these fucking sea worlds and all this stuff. Um, and I'd imagine if there wasn't some form of humanity, whether you want to look at it like humanity of a dog or humanity of a dolphin, to be willing to cooperate like that is kind of, in my opinion, that's a very human thing. To cooperate with another species. I
Yeah,
think
I
that
mean,
that's probably.
it takes training, or what we would call training for an animal. It's really just conditioning. I mean, humans are conditioned to do certain things too. But yeah,
But
man, you're
there are
absolutely
some
right.
animals, there are some creatures, like look at a shark. You don't see humanity in a shark. You
Sure.
know what I mean? For the most part, there are, maternal aspects that are like similar, to a mother of a person, but not so much, what's behind the eyes. Like a lot of people will suggest and say and speak out about when like they go swimming with the dolphins, or that there is a vibe these creatures give off, like you're aware that they're aware that you are. um like you look them in the face and they look back at you, and you don't see like an emptiness. It's not just big black eyes like a shark. Like a shark just got those big, kind of just almost soulless black eyes. And I think like our livestock, it has a very similar kind of feel to it at a certain degree. Like If you ever been around cattle and stuff, the weird thing is not so much pigs.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Pigs don't
pigs.
have that that vibe to them like cattle do. Not so much, not to me. Everybody's got a different feeling, you know,
Yeah.
when it comes to that. But pigs are very reminiscent of people.
If you've ever held the little baby pig, dude, they are so damn cute. And it's like, dude, I makes me not want to eat pork
Yes,
products.
especially like in Iowa here, they're all over the place, right? So you've got like trucks driving around with truckloads of baby pigs,
Oh
and it's
man.
like, oh,
Yeah.
dude, and you just know where they're going, or they're usually going to a different farm from like a birthing place, when they're that little. But but yeah, so
Yeah,
like
that's how they make
in certain
bacon bits.
creatures, yes, yeah, then they freeze dry them and shove them in a little thing.
No,
Oh,
yeah,
dude,
it
brutal.
is sad, dude.
But so like, and I think most people can admit to seeing some humanity in creatures, and along with the swimmers, and that would include things like manatees. And manatees have always, to me, seemed not only out of place but very, very human. And like, from what I understand, they're very loving. They're always wanting to come up to boats and see what the fuck the people are up to. So, you know, imagine if you were a human from the past got turned into a fucking manatee, and there have been stories through your manatee line, right? About being human in the past and being one of these things that walked up on land and had all this cool stuff going, you know, for you because you just kept your consciousness. Your language changes, you know, the way you behave changes, but there's still that underlying consciousness that you're able to communicate with your fellow manatees, but maybe not the humans up there. So you go and fucking swim up to their boat, get all chopped up by their propeller and
Yeah.
shit, and keep doing it over and over again because all you want to do is be back with your fucking people.
Well, dude, I saw this really insane video a while ago. A seal running away from a killer whale, and he jumped up on a fisher's boat because he felt more safe on the damn boat with these people than he did in
Yeah.
the ocean with the whale trying to kill it. And it makes sense when you're being hunted down. But it was just it lends credence to that idea that you're throwing out there, dude. But
Well,
what
yeah,
about
and
these
I mean,
lizard herders here?
this is pretty wild because they have two different forms of like these lizard type things, and you know, beings, creatures in here. They have the lizard herders, which were, you know, like the slave driver of the lizards. Like, so I guess maybe some of the actual reptiles were, you know, all brawn maybe and not brain, and maybe these lizard herders were more brain, less brawn, so they were able to kind of dictate what the other primitive, you know, lizards were up to or something. And it's really crazy, because
Later, it looks like the lizards started really kind of taking over with the humans because of the climate, right? I mean, that's at least what this guy says. He says, like, you know, the humans and the lizards were pretty darn even. And then because of the climate, the lizards started overpowering the humans. And we
right,
hear
right.
that a lot in the conspiracy world today, that these are lizard people that run us and shit. It's crazy.
Right, and the crazy thing about that is think about lizards, right? Lizards are, you know, in most cases cold-blooded, so they would have to exist on a surface in some capacity. They would have to have a certain temperature. So a lot of the time, people look at it as, okay, then it makes sense that they might live in the earth where it's hotter down there, right? Because they're cold-blooded. They're ectothermic. I think that's the word, where they draw the heat energy in from outside of them, in order to process like their food and stuff, to have that energy. Like, whereas we typically gain it from like a chemical, you know, or sometimes like vitamin D is a
Yeah.
catalyst for us to digest things, and that's through sunlight. So these lizard things may have, you know, we have this ice age in the 10,000 year past or something, right? So maybe these things took off underground and through like a proxy, or the royal family, you know what I mean? Kind of took charge of the top world, where maybe
Mm.
they don't get along so well. So they have us dig all these fucking tunnels and you know what I mean? All this other crazy underground stuff.
Or the
And
worm people would be doing that, right?
right, dude, and see, like, that's why, when it talks about worm people, and you hear about things like sandworms, like in Dune, or like in Beetlejuice, especially, there's a lot of Beetlejuice that screams some of this art in here. But you know, you have these sandworms like brought up from time to time, and I really feel like ideas as they're presented have to come from somewhere. Like inspiration, yes, is like a divine thing that comes from God, or is like a personal thing. But I think there's a lot more to it, like in a metaphysical kind of way, where when you're imagining things, you're actually drawing from somewhere. You're pulling in this information from somewhere, whether it's um from deep inside of your own like psyche, from memories or not. It's still is outside of you in this energetic field that each of us has. You know what I mean? So that's crazy. But they're these lizard herders. It's crazy because they called them lizard herders. You know what I mean? Like maybe these were the ones that were like kind of bitch slapping the dinosaurs around and getting them to work for them or whatever, because there's evidence of humanoids and dinosaurs living, cohesively in the past, supposedly. So another note about this author, Koseman, is he's also the author and like illustrator in corroboration with others having to do with dinosaurs, which is very interesting. Because when you have somebody working on sci-fi, quote unquote, as this is, and then on the other side of it, they're working with the mainstream to create this dinosaur narrative. We all try to find balance in certain ways in our lives, and perhaps if you're putting out information that's predominantly garbage on one side, maybe you have to make up for it, balance your karma out. Not to say that dinosaurs are right or this is closer to right. I think it could be a mixture of both. Which speaks to all ideas just being a small part of the collective that is this realm, which is pretty awesome. And that also leads to more random shit coming out of my mouth, because it all, like, we've all been separated so heavily and segregated from each other, and like each from the other's ideas for so long, that I think it's definitely high time to pull a lot of this stuff back in, own a lot of this stuff, and fuck it, run with it. You know what I mean? Like what can you get out of it? Like this, you've got these
the tempters, dude. These are weird. I like these.
And it's kind of like it's almost like a humanoid kind of insect. This is the queen here in the middle, that's anchored into the ground, and she's got her little males that run around and do her bidding, kind of similar to like termites. And it's really strange because termites have a different look to them. If you've ever seen a termite up close, they have a different kind of insectoid look. They're pale. They're like almost albino kind of color. And the same thing about like moles are also an albino kind of color. This is very reminiscent of a mole. I don't know that moles work in social groups like this, but they definitely dig into the ground and reside in the ground. So
well, and these supposedly the females were the ones in charge of these societies, and then the males just did everything for the females. And if they did want to mate with the female, the male, this little guy, would jump into this, and it would the female, the larger creature, would decide if it wanted to mate or just eat it, and it would eat it out of this thing. So dude, this reminds me honestly of, like, have you ever seen like how many like skinny black dudes love fat white chicks?
I love it.
That's what this is, dude.
Holy shit, dude. That's 100%. And see, like, I honestly, I didn't know yesterday when I was like, hey, let's look into this, just how many like deep little corners of humanity these all play into. And that's perfect, because yeah, it kind of does, it kind of does look that way, dude. Yeah, they love to jump in that giant white vagina, dude.
Yeah, there's something about it. And this one looks like it needs to shave, if you see that. I don't know if that's part of the ground or
no, that's definitely not part of the ground. Not from my point of view.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. It's just crazy, but yeah, it's fascinating.
And yeah, so whether you want to look at it like these were directly related, we are related to these directly in some way, or you want to look at it like think of different types of people, and especially with something like this bone crusher, right? When think of like Neanderthals, they basically are corpse eating primitives, right? And you think about how a lot of people talk about meat being like a degradation to your humanity. Like you eat meat and it just rots in your guts and blah blah blah. But like, Dude, if we are some form of a relative of this type of an entity or creature, um, perhaps eating meat is in our past, our distant past. You know what I mean? And we just still hold on to it because it's fucking delicious. And
Yeah, did you notice this here, Randy? Where I mean, look at this thing's mouth. I don't think
yeah,
that
it's like a
people.
beak.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's something in his mouth, so that's his mouth right there. There's
This
something
is
in
this
it.
is like the jaw here. And it's like a carrion bird, like a crow or a vulture.
It's
How
the
they have
same
that
thing.
sharp beak. Um, yeah, it's crazy. I think it's supposed to be more like a beak type of a situation there. Like whereas maybe we've evolved teeth, individual teeth. You know, if you go back far enough, perhaps it's a big tooth, like you see the birds have.
Gotcha.
And being that these things are eating rotting flesh, kind of similar to a crow, like I was saying, or a vulture, um, and their flesh rots in their bellies or whatever. So you know they were a very like hardy breed, it says here, you know what I mean. um
Yeah,
so
9 feet tall. I mean, big, giant, aggressive people.
yes. And we've got those too. You know what I mean. Here's the crazy thing: a creature could feed on putrefying meat, stink like a grave, and express its affection by, get this, defecating on others.
Yes, I remember
But it
now.
might
This is
but it
how
might
they
as well be your own
communicated.
grandchild and the last hope of mankind. Yes. So like termites use chemicals, right?
And
Or
rats,
and rats too. They love to shit all around all their friends.
they
Yes.
communicate with shit and piss. Yes, that's crazy.
So
Dude,
you
this
know,
was one of my favorites here, Randy. The
yes.
colonials. This seems terrifying. I feel so bad for these things. And you know that there are people out here like this. These are like what we would call the NPCs, right? This quilt of subhumans that's just permanently stuck together and they laid in fields. So these things are fully conscious, but they don't move. They can't do
Yes,
anything on
as
their
and
own.
this
They're
is as a cruel joke.
Yeah.
You know, these Q turned these beings into like individual cells, basically. And the crazy thing about these colonials is if you look at today's human, for example, we are a compilation of many specialized cells that all work together to keep us alive. And that's kind of what these colonials are doing, is they're working together to process what could otherwise be considered waste products and use them for energy for themselves. So like a blanket, or excuse me, or a quilt, they would just lay in fields and soak up this whatever gunk that was the ground at that time, and feed off of that. So that's pretty interesting because you know, unlike the breatharians that maybe lived on this realm at one point, we consume chemicals to uh, to exist. You know, so and we know that our skin is one big organ, and our each of our organs have specialized cells that do just that job. So this
Dude,
is
for
kind of also an aspect of humanity, which is crazy. That's why the uh wow, yeah.
for 40 million years they suffered. Generation after generation were born into the most miserable of lives while absorbing the pain of all they were going through. So constantly hungry, constantly scared, constantly in pain, these things are just stuck. And I feel
And
that
there's
there
that
are
40,
bloodlines that
that
are
number
going through this.
40, that number 40 really speaks to me too. You have the, you know, the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years, right?
Oh,
You have these different things in our histories that kind of speak to that number 40. So it's kind of crazy to see that and just to notice that. So just putting that out there.
yeah.
But
Doesn't the Bible say 40 days and the 40 days means 40 years?
well, 40 days was or 40 days and nights was the flood, 40 years was the wandering in the
Okay.
desert. So there's a lot of this throwback to this number
40, 40,
40.
40. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so but yeah, so you've
Flyers.
got them, yes, the flyers, and you know, you call these like the pterodactyls, right? Like we're used to seeing them with a dinosaur head. Right? But we only know the skeletons that they've shown us, but the skeletons are remarkably close to this. You
Mm-hmm.
know, through a slightly different lens or a different concept, you could end up with this after, you know, or like in Beetlejuice, like I was talking about earlier, where they stretch their heads out when they go to the netherworld. and they look
Yeah.
all like birdly. So that really kind of stood out. But yeah, these are flyers, and they gave up. They didn't have to give up their humanity for the power of flight, because they had a heart that was shaped like a starfish, and would pump their blood and all their nutrients effectively through their body.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
they had a unique turbine-like heart, artificially developed during the regime of Q. So perhaps these things, maybe that's part of why they eventually died out, was they didn't have these Q overlords there to consistently, maintain and modify their genetic structure. But yeah, a starfish shaped organ sat in the middle of the chest, funneling oxygen to the lungs and bloodstream. And so
What do
they
you
didn't have
think
to
that
give
this
up.
has to do with QAnon? I got to ask you at this point.
That's the crazy thing, is I'm trying to figure that out. Like, I wonder though, like Q in this is that force of chaos, right?
Yeah.
And QAnon, you have this chaos magic element to it. You have this Pepe the Frog kind of chaos magic situation going around this Q thing. I think a lot of it was to just distract and like kind of break people apart. Still, again, you have this recurring theme when it comes to Q, of fracturing social structures.
Well,
And
Steve Bannon said straight up that Donald Trump was an agent of chaos and he was a man of time. He was meant to bring humankind as a whole, not just in the country, but there's the gold age, silver age, bronze or copper age, and then the dark age, depending on what you call that third age. We're supposedly in the copper or bronze age, and to avoid going to the dark age, we're supposed to go back to the silver age. So it's interesting. I've talked about this a few times on my show, but the gold age is the age of religion. Silver is the age of military. Copper or bronze is the age of the merchant. And then the dark age is the age of the slave. So we're clearly in the age of the merchant right now. Some people are dumb and they'll say, no, we're in the age of the slave. It's like, no, dude, things can get so much worse. We're in the age of the merchant, the merchants, Amazon, Tesla, Google. These companies are more powerful than your government is. That's the idea. In the Silver Age, around World War II and so on, World War I, World War II, the military was stronger than the governments, right? These were the people enacting everything. And in the Golden Age, years and generations before World War I and World War II, you have the churches being the most powerful structures of society. So, um,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
going to
and
be
in order
interesting,
to
man.
prevent that dawn of the slaves, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
they do call it the dark age, but you can look at it in a different way too. What they tell us was the dark ages in the past. We're finding out more and more that this was like a Renaissance era. You know what I mean? That there was this renaissance of the people back in these supposed dark ages, where we have like the technology that we're starting to become privy to, of like the 16 and 1700s airships. A lot of steampunk type stuff is coming up when it comes to the past,
yeah.
that time period that these societies, these groups will have us believe was like a dark age. So to prevent the slaves, or people like us, from taking over, essentially, you have your agent of chaos, right? Your Q, your Donald Trump, to kind of try to push it backwards. But I'm a firm believer in the cyclical nature of time, and I don't think there is going back. There's definitely like a reaching and a grasping for some kind of power right now, and I know everybody can kind of relate and see that going on. The constant changing of the narrative to manipulate perception and so on is really like upticked a lot in the last couple of few years. So yeah, maybe it's to prevent this renaissance, if you are, or this dark age, however you want to call it, depending on your status in society, seems to dictate how people look at that particular period in time. So it's very interesting that we have this Q element, this agent of chaos, and then we have some creatures that were post-humans, like these hand flappers here. Their wings, once used for butterfly like flutters in the unearthly gardens of Q, had shrunken and reverted back to manual conditions. So think of like, I don't know, all these birds and stuff that are useless flappers out there in the world.
Yeah.
And then we have people that are just useless flappers out there in the world doing their choreography, right? Doing their dancing on MTV, their sexual prowess kind of acts. And that's exactly and basically all that these hand flappers were able to do was demonstrate their sexual prowess through
Well,
demonstrations of
yeah, dude,
flapping.
this reminds me straight up of something, this may not be something that's a popular thought, but it reminds me of people that are just not good at anything and like they're almost a waste of space. And there is such a thing. I'm not one of these people that's like everyone has a purpose. There are some people out there that, whether it's their own fault or whatever, they just can't do anything. Like they can't do anything right. And I'm not saying that anyone should really get upset with themselves if they can't do it. Just fucking figure it out. You know what I mean? There's people out there that just don't even try, it seems. And I think that this is what this is these hand flappers.
That very well could be. It also kind of is reminiscent of like some of these tribal groups of people. When you look at Discovery Channel and you see like these Amazonian tribal groups, and really all they do is forage and maybe a little bit of hunting and just a lot of procreation. You know what I mean? Like that's their only focus, and they're plenty happy to be those people, those groups, and yeah, so they don't advance technologically.
Yeah.
They don't advance really very far in their tool making and stuff. These are some creatures that maybe still do not use tools. There are still humans on this planet that in their social groups do not use tools. They just use things as nature presents them, which these creatures here would most likely have to do also, because and you see these dances that a lot of these tribes do, a lot of these coming of age kind of things is very reminiscent of these like hand flappers.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and if you had a ball sack like that, Randy, I mean,
Dude, I'd be
you
all
wouldn't
about it,
try with
bro.
anything.
No, hell no.
That's the thing. Well, no, and like
Yeah.
again, this is I've heard comedians talking about how like there's like these surfer type dudes that just don't give a shit about anything other than just like getting out there, and they've got like 5 years of good life. You know what I mean? When they're still attractive, when they're still fit, and then like they're as a kid they didn't have much going on, as an older adult they don't have anything going on either. So like there's just something to be said about these individuals that just don't try at all with anything. I think that that's what
But they're
those are.
perfectly happy to do that. They're
Yeah.
perfectly okay with that. So it's like almost like they evolved into that niche,
Yeah.
from somewhere. And so that definitely speaks to it. And then yeah, you have the blind folk, right? Like so when these
These are
Q
interesting
came,
too.
yes, when these Q came, they dug in deep, underground to escape. And this reminds me a lot of like the tales of goblins and like the mountain folk. There's a lot of like tales like this in the Appalachia, of these entities or these creatures that live in the cave systems or in the dark, um and it's just wild because like they have these bigger ears, or they're maybe blind. We see some of these traits in bats. Bats are also mammals, so that's pretty interesting.
Well,
um
moles too, right? I mean, moles don't even really have eyes, I don't think.
yeah, I don't think they really do, not in the sense that we do. They primarily go off of like vibrations
Yeah.
in the earth. So that evolved from somewhere, whether it evolved from a single cell and then an amoeba and then so on and so forth, or whether it's a reverse situation, kind of like this lore suggests. And hopefully people will understand and be understanding about these concepts are not a finite. This is listed as a fiction. You know what I mean? It's just a story. What you do with these stories, dictates, where you go in your life. Kind of the same as what we do with our histories,
Yep.
will dictate where we go. So, you can kind of, hopefully people could take this with a grain of salt and just see that a lot of people have traits. Like I was kind of explaining to you earlier, you ever seen that a certain person walking around or at the store and you're like, oh, that's a really, really mousy looking chick. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
I mean? And so, what if, throw back all the way back into the past, you have these these situations. It very well could be. It's an interesting way to look at it. And this is super interesting to me. I think we've all kind of seen what a flounder or a halibut looks like. And that's because they live at the bottom of the ocean where the pressure is, substantial, so they can't grow up. They kind of grow out, and that's where these lopsiders here kind of came into play. We see a lot of deep sea like fish, weird skeletal structures. We have the angler fish that has a similar kind of thing on its head, that kind of, it tempts the prey with its little dangly, and then eats them. So it's very, very reminiscent of this here. And then, then we've got some people that hang out in their homes and become, massive bedlocked people. You know what I mean? And they just kind of scoop the food and poop it out, and that's about it. So we have a lot of similar situations in humanity as we know it now. And you
can even notice here, Randy, the spine's crooked.
Yes, and we have scoliosis in some people, and
a little scoliosis at play here.
Oh yeah. So moving on here to the striders.
These were cool too. They grew up on a planet with little gravity in the beginning, and this is why they got so tall. But because there was no gravity or little gravity, their bones are very brittle, so they would fall over. And even if this thing were just to trip on its own power, it would just die, because think of that movie with Samuel L. Jackson where he's got glass bones. Yes. That's what this thing is.
Yes, exactly. And the crazy thing is you look at this and you see a very similar nature to the Brontosaurus, or these giant creatures of our Earth's distant past. We are told that they stand a certain way based on somebody putting a skeleton together. But if you look at this picture here, and you can kind of just imagine this thing laying down on all fours, you would have a very similar kind of profile to what we would consider as a dinosaur. And it's interesting that this author, this writer, also does work about illustrating what we consider dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures also. So that in itself just kind of speaks to me, and others can kind of make of it what they will. But and we have people that develop these diseases, like that movie Glass, where their bones are incredibly brittle, and we are told that these are genetic defects. But what if they're just remnants? You know what I mean? Just genetic remnants of past species, kind of like these. Now, this is really super interesting. You have the parasites, right? On this world, they broke down into separate lineages. One was they were crippled, so they were essentially unable to move and things on their own. And then on the other side of this, you had the host parasites. So they kind of work together, to survive. And we also have a lot of this going on in the world today. You have people that are lesser, in a manner of speaking, they're lesser people. They're ambulatory vampires. They're not capable of creating or doing on their own. People can call these lizard people or parasites, but it's still kind of the same situation here.
I felt like this was a dysfunctional relationship type of a person, someone that's just perpetually in dysfunctional relationships.
Yes, and or just gravitates, there are people that are the host mentality. They'll gravitate towards having these parasites in their life, and there are people of the parasite kind of category that seek out their prey or their hosts. So there's definitely, and dysfunctional relationships, very, very similar to what we have going on here with these parasite entities or creatures.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. We got to try and rifle through these. If we got to do a part 2, I'm also down to do that, man. This is
I think we really probably should, because these are all just the first subset of subhumans, and it goes on from here, and they evolve. So kind of like Pokemon, you have that evolution, right? There's a lot of that happens within this story. So we probably will have to do a second one of just the evolutions, and see how that kind of ties into also what we see in the world today. So,
and in the presentation here, or in the book itself, we're just about halfway through. So after a couple more, it may be a perfect time to wrap it up
Yeah,
and
we'll
then we
do
can
that. We
revisit.
definitely will do a part two. It's definitely worth the time and effort to go through and kind of bring this way of thinking to light, because
Yeah.
I think we all kind of have to learn to reflect through other people, to use others as a sounding board to better know ourselves, and through stories like this and folklore, we're able to kind of more successfully attain that. If you're so busy looking through the lens that we're provided through media and the tales we're given on the History Channel or whatever, you're only going to ever see yourself through one specific point of view. And a lot of people through the point of view of media and everything we're provided aren't able to find themselves. They're not able uh, to reflect effectively. So it's awesome to have fictions and stories like this to be able to kind of relate to. And this is super interesting. Here you have these finger fishers. And on this realm, or in this world, it's just like an inland sea, a very shallow sea where lots of sea life and everything. So these things over time developed these long fingers. An interesting thing about these little hook things here on their fingers is, if you ever seen Jurassic Park, you have the velociraptors, and they
Yeah.
have this kind of hook mechanism on their claws. So I think that that's very interesting. I'm not sure what to read into that, but it's pretty cool. So these things were just like a peaceful kind of fisherman. And if you know, in the past, the fishermen of humanity, like in Jesus' time, were very peaceful people. They'd just fish and be merry. Like that's what these particular beings left here. But it does seem that somewhere along the line, this agent of chaos kind of made it difficult for any of these one species to relate to each other, because they spread them out, whether it's through time or on different realms or worlds, remains yet to be seen. But yeah, so we had a period of time in the past where people were pretty much just fisher people, and that's what they did. We're not in that time anymore. It's kind of a time of use and abuse on this planet, but maybe at some point we're in a peaceful existence with each other, and we're all just fishermen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. It says that it adapted very sharp teeth over time. So it's like, I wonder if the piece wasn't cutting it and it had to get a little violent. It had to adopt some sharp teeth, and it went from being this soft, sort of passive, living off the land. There's plenty of stuff, that mentality of abundance. But then for some reason they had to change that. And this is why they grew the sharp teeth.
Yeah, it could very well be. Or the creatures that they were fishing, developed some form of a defense.
Sure.
And the crazy thing is, like we were talking about the predators and the prey when it comes to humans, that may very well be. This can all be like a lens to see ourselves, which is super awesome. But this is super interesting. These are called the hedonist, and basically their existence was, they lived on a fantastic garden planet, right?
And they
Um,
loved having sex. That was all
that's
it was
it.
about.
Yeah, dude, it was all about just getting some, right? So without any point in sexual competition, their natural selection would proceed at a very slow pace. But these creatures would just have to fuck so many times to become impregnated, that was kind of just the gist of their society. Was almost a weird kind of Roman-esque kind of
Yeah.
feel.
At
See a
the
lot
end
of
of Rome,
movies
right?
about, yeah, you see a lot of movies about Rome and the fall of Rome, and these hedonists, and this is exactly what we have there, is a demonstration of hedonism. A lot of people relate that to like Sodom and Gomorrah. You have these hedonistic kind of tendencies, and so we see that here. And the weird thing is it's demonstrated in a creature that has the legs of a chicken, which if you scroll down a little bit more there, yes, they have like these chickeny legs. And what do we call the hoe in the hood anymore, right? Chicken head. So
Yeah.
so it's like, it's very interesting to see this chicken trait here. But it's also interesting to note that this resembles like a Japanese person. And if you
Yeah, I
maybe it's
could see
just the
that.
hair, the kind of Japanese crazy ring looking hair. And but if you know anything about the Japanese, they're all about their sexual nature, right? Like,
They
I
are
mean,
very weird too. They're all about kinks.
yes. So this is also kind of speaks to this form of reality. You see like the tailbone situation here,
That's
like maybe.
weird, dude. It looks like a chicken tail or a turkey tail or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And it's also strange that we as humans have this remnant of a tail,
Yeah,
you know.
the tailbone. Yeah.
But yeah, these pictures always remind me of like Beetlejuice, for some reason, of the
Well, that one
netherworld.
really does look like that, Randy. It looks
It,
exactly like, and then what's interesting about these things too is they liked having sex so much and trying to breed that they didn't have like a thought in their head, from what I understand. Like they were just strictly, their life was about sex. That's all that it was. So I mean, clearly there are people out there like that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And it's not the
100%.
porn stars of the world. Those people are business people. I've come to find this to be very true, that usually oftentimes it's not someone that's really ugly and it's not someone that's really attractive. That's your average sex addict. You get a lot of people that are just painfully average that are sex addicts. And I feel like that's what this is. And that leads into that whole idea where, like, if you really don't have anything else going on, you may gravitate towards nothing but sex. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I often wonder, like when we prior to like engaging in this experience, do we sit down and, like some people suggest, have a soul contract and basically pick our attributes, kind of like in an RPG game. You can pick your species and your attributes, your strengths and your weaknesses prior to diving in. And then, once we dive in, we get amnesia or whatever. And so we have these like innate kind of parts of our personality. Some people have a fucking 12-inch dick, and that's all that they do with their life.
Yeah.
Other people, and it's believed in India, it's kind of interesting that their belief is that, generally speaking, the smaller a man's penis is, the more successful he is.
I could
So
see that.
there's that kind of um interesting duality here, where you have these of great sexual prowess and nothing else, and then you have people that are closer to like the spacers, or these giant brained people or entities that's all they have is their mind. So it again, every little aspect of this book kind of speaks to whether a certain type of people or a certain characteristic of each of ourselves at a certain time in our lives.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I oftentimes blame my lack of success for the size of my schlong. It's a good thing that you said that. It makes me feel more normal.
Right on.
No,
But
totally
yeah,
kidding. So yeah, but I
100%.
think that this is actually a great spot to leave off on, because like I said, we're about halfway through, and then we can come back, we can revisit these different creatures. I'll give a preview of some of these other things. I mean, just a really fun, I mean, this kind of looks like Gollum from
Yeah,
Lord of the
this is
Rings.
this is one that eats insects. This is the spacers
Yeah.
here. So
We got a
yeah, it's gonna
lot of
the
different
ruin
creatures to look
haunters. I'm
into.
looking forward to getting into the ruin haunters. It speaks a lot to our society now. So yeah, there's the snake people. We've got these weird underground tunnels that are made of brick, and they're perfectly round all over the earth.
There's
So
that Velociraptor claw you were talking about.
yes,
That's
yes. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of awesome stuff we can dig back into again the next time.
Yeah,
So
dude,
I'm
this is a
stoked. I'm
blast,
super
Randy.
stoked. Yeah, absolutely.
This was real fun, dude. So I mean, so what, let's plug your stuff again. We'll get back into this into the second half. Probably just an episode or two away from right now. And I mean, dude, there's a lot more here. I would recommend anyone go check out this dude's work. We mentioned it at the beginning. I don't know if you remember his name off the top of your head, but the book is called All Tomorrows.
Yeah, CM Koseman.
Okay.
and,
So
and
yeah,
uh, you can find the audiobook on YouTube. There's also like a condensed version that's only like 40 or 45 minutes long, and it has all of the pictures of all of the critters and the different aspects or different faces of humanity. So
yeah.
definitely worth looking into, and it'll be cool because we'll get this one out and people can dig into that and get more of a feel for it, and then we can dive into the more complex, because these creatures, as they evolve, they become more complex kind of as we do.
Yeah.
So
It's weird. Yeah, it seems like they like, when we're seeing all these different creatures, this is like a medium evolutionary stage. They supposedly start from humans, and then they devolve into these different things, and then over time they turn back into humans, it seems. So it's kind of a fun thing. This was all your idea to talk about this stuff, so I appreciate you bringing this, dude. This is a really cool topic. I would have never talked about something like this if it
Yeah,
wasn't
for
for you,
sure.
Randy.
I appreciate that. And yeah, it's just, like we kind of touched on in the beginning, if I brought the awareness of something and it speaks to me, I feel it's my duty to humanity, if you will, to put it out there and to help provide different perspectives for folks. Because I've been blessed and fortunate enough to dig my own perceptions, many different ways of looking at things out of a lot of fictions, and a lot of other creative works from people. So to bring this, to the attention of our sphere of influence, if you will, is a huge thing. And it's different than all the stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
But it still seems to me, very relevant to the situation of humanity. So, it's a different way of looking at things and maybe reflecting. And I think that that's super important.
Yeah, dude, it's relevant and it's fun. It's kind of fun to be like, oh, I know someone that looks like what, one of these freaks. You know what I mean? Everyone knows something that looks like a colonial or a whatever, a
Or behaves
skinwalker.
like
I
a
know that's not even right.
parasite. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, but
dude.
100%, dude. Yeah. 100%. So there's a lot to take away from it. And it's a nice vacation from the onslaught of insanity that we're that we're getting from all angles right now.
Definitely, dude. And insane visuals. So again, thanks, Randy. Plug your stuff.
Yeah. I'm Random Randy. You can find me at Red Thread Podcast on Spotify, Podcast Addict, Podbean, and you can reach me on Instagram at Random Fracts. And I appreciate you having me on, Ryan. This is phenomenal. I'll be plugging this on my feed too, so keep an eye out for it, folks. And come join me over there at Red Thread Podcast. All are welcome.
Yeah, I would recommend you guys go check his show out. He's not on Apple yet. He will be soon. We're trying to work on that. But yeah, I think that you are on Spotify, as you said. That's another big one. So, dude, yeah, go check this guy's show out. It's all over the place, and it's in all over the place in a good way. There is some deep thought. There's some interesting things being thrown around over there. And dude, you're tied in with like a lot of my friends, dude. So I really do appreciate doing this with me, bringing something new to my attention, to my audience's attention. And we'll definitely be doing a part 2 on this whole thing. So you have a good night, Randy, and everyone listening. We'll be back here very soon.